week's cut.
All right, everyone. This is one of my favorite topics. Episode 6 of the Work in Progress series. I'm going to etch my logo and etch and polish out my Hamon. I've got the blade here. It's all sanded to 600 grit. You can see a little bit of lines and unevenness. We'll fix that in a little bit. I use the marker, and I'm going to mark my plunge line so that you can see when you're placing your logo or your stencil that you don't want to go below that line. I didn't write anything there. I was just pointing out where I think I'm going to put my logo. Anyway, that line lets you see a little better. These are stencils from Ernie Lightning or Blue Lightning Forge. Ernie Gropstitch, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He makes great stencils. So I would highly recommend him. He's also quick, and he'll help you a little bit with your logo if you need to. He'll make sure that it's going to etch nicely, which is always nice for new makers. So I'm just cutting some electrical tape here. That piece was all bent and funny, so I cut it off. I'll cut another length. Make sure your logo's straight. You don't want to etch your name backwards. Some logos don't matter. Mine does because it's got words. Ryan and Utah and USA. You don't want it to say ASU, Hatu, Nair. Go ahead and place it where you want it with that bottom piece of tape. And you want that stencil to lay flat. You don't want it to lift up every time you take pressure off it. So I'm going to put 2 other pieces of tape on either side. So I hold it down and kind of pull to the right so that it stretches that stencil out. And then the other piece of tape. And I pull again. Make sure it stretches it out so it's nice and tight. All right. I hadn't mentioned, I just wash my blade with soapy water and soapy hot water before I etch. So it doesn't have any oils or anything that would resist. It will not etch through black marker. So if you put your name or anything over that black marker line I did, it will not etch through that. I've just got some felt. You can get it at any fabric store. Nothing special. This used to be my poker table felt. I deconstructed my poker table since we hardly ever play poker anymore. And that's what I use. So I've got almost a lifetime supply of felt. I've got the Personalizer. They also make a Personalizer Plus etching machine. Hold it on there with a rubber band. Make sure it's tight. So you've got a negative and a positive. I believe since it's red, this is the positive. I don't think it matters. As long as you got electricity running through it, it wouldn't matter which way it goes. This is just etchant solution. I buy it, I think, from USA Knife Maker, maybe. It's just a electrolyte. Do a thin layer on the felt. I rub it with my finger and then kind of dab off all the excess. You don't need too much etchant. Now turn it on, and I have this on the etch setting because I'm going to sand it and dip it in ferric chloride to bring out the Hamon. The mark just darkens. We're not going to need that. If you're doing a stainless blade, you just place it on mark and it makes a black mark. It doesn't burn into it. So this is actually burning down into the steel on the etch setting. I just hold it there on that, make sure it's nice and flat. So I kind of wiggle it back and forth to make sure I've got it on the flat. Take it off, let it breathe a little bit, put it back on. I did this 2 or 3 times, 30 to 40 seconds each time. My logo's very small writing. Sometimes I get some bad etches. The bigger your lines, the bolder your logo, the better it etches. So you may want to keep that in mind if you're still designing your logo, or at least for your etching. Lorian Arnold, we do some collaborations, and he's got an LA logo, and it etches really nice because it's just bold. I always feel bad every time I etch one of his and go back to mine that mine don't etch that well. And you can laser stuff. Lasering is getting pretty reasonable, so a lot of people are lasering their logos on. Lasering their logos on? Is that how you say it? Having their logos lasered on. I've never done it, so I like to keep everything in-house that I can. I do all my heat treats, pretty much everything in-house. So we're just working through it. The more series you do, the deeper it goes. That switch is broken. So I actually have a replacement switch. I think this is actually where I realized it was broken. Luckily it was broke on etch, so we're just fine. I guess that'll be my project for tonight, fix that switch. All right. So I go ahead and if you hold your logo or your stencil down, you'll save it. It'll help not crack it. So I hold it down and peel the tape off this way rather than the other way, because if you fold that stencil over like I'm doing the tape there, it will crack that stencil and not be usable. So you should be able to get quite a few uses out of your stencils. I spray it with Windex to kind of neutralize that etchant. Make sure your etcher's off so they don't short it out if you touch those things together. Take the felt off, throw that away. I wipe my block nice so that it doesn't have any etchant left on it. Just take normal Windex. I think it's the ammonia in the Windex that works on this. Ammonia is a little strong, so I don't use it. I will use ammonia a little later in this episode, but not for this. All right, so you've got your nice logo. Get some ammonia on there as well. Nice. All right, so we've got it just, this is my hand sanding board. I've just got it hanging off the end so I don't worry about scratching the bottom side. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this. You can overdo your pressure if you don't have backing underneath. So I'm just hitting it lightly with a 3 or 600. Actually, that's 320. Sometimes I'll just go with 300 depending on how crisp the etch is. So you can kind of see in the video that that's got some white burning on the edges, so it's not very sharp. So in this case, 600 is not going to clean it up as well as I would like, so I go to some 320 and lightly sand that up so it crisps those edges of your logo up a little bit. Yep, so I'm at 320 and I'm just going to take a thin layer off to sharpen those edges. Windex again. You can't do too much Windex in this part of the process because you've got etchant that will rust your blade. So you can already see that cleaned up all that white blurriness. So I'm pretty happy with that. It doesn't take much. Now I go back to 600 and polish it up to 600. And this is why I call it my dirty Hamon. Nick Wheeler and Mike Quisenberry, among many others, guys that I look up to amazingly and have helped me along the way a ton. They'll take their sanding up to 2,000, even higher than that sometimes, and you get a really delicate, fine Hamon when you do that. They also will use lemon juice instead of ferric. So I was showing here is I pulled it past that plunge line and it ripped the paper, so you got to be careful not to do that. It can also ruin your sanding on your flats, so lesson learned there. And just be careful not to do that. But anyway, they like the really light, the ashi and the white shadowy lines in your blade, and I love that. The only problem with that is if you're going to use a knife, that goes away very quickly, where my dirty Hamon, will stay through quite a bit of use. The knife I take backpacking, I keep it well oiled. You can still see the Hamon, and I've used it hundreds of times. And it's a W2 blade with a Hamon, so that's why I prefer the dirty Hamon. I can polish it up that high, and I've done a few that way, but I don't do that very often. I've actually got quite a few fans of the dirty Hamon, so. So here I'm using the 600 grit sandpaper. You can see that it's polishing it up nice. A little, almost mirror. It's starting to shine pretty well. You can start seeing reflections in it. And it does not have to be a perfect 600 grit, but the more time you spend doing this, the better result you get. So now we'll flip it over to the other side. And I think I've already got it to 600 on the other side, but because I etched my logo on this side, I had to clean this side up. So we're at 600 on both sides now. You can see it reflects pretty well. Not perfect, but that's okay. All right, here we are in my other shop, my small shop. I've got a tube of PVC, I think it's a 3-inch pipe that I keep my ferric chloride. When I started out, this was a 10-to-1 mix of distilled water to ferric chloride. So 10 parts distilled water, 1 part ferric chloride. It's not that anymore just from using it. I know that we're low right now, so I'm going to have to change it. But this is what I get it from Radio Shack. It's PCB etchant. You can actually order ferric, but it's the same thing. And this is diluted ferric from Radio Shack. It's not 100% ferric, so I'm taking whatever that solution is from Radio Shack and diluting that 10-to-1 with distilled water. I use dish soap, Dawn dish detergent, to clean up the blade. Make sure I get all the oils, anything that might resist that etch off. I'm also using hot water, and I want it to sud up nice, so I get a nice sud. This is where I constantly tear my rubber gloves. I catch it on that point. So I try to swipe it that way so I don't tear it. I've learned my lesson fairly well. When you bring your hand back and catch that tip, it tears your glove. All right, I've got some permanent markers still in there from when I etched, so I was just making sure that that came off. If you can't get the permanent marker off like I just did there, you can use acetone and then wash it. So that was hot water. I got my blade nice and hot. I should buy stock in these makeup pad removers. I buy a ton of them. I use them all the time. So that's what I use to rub my ferric and clean up my etch with. So I just dip that. This is a really quick etch just to get contact on all the surfaces. So I'm just rubbing to make sure that that ferric is getting really good contact on all the metal. I'm not really doing my etch right now. It is etching, but that's just to make sure it's a nice even coat. So I do that. Then I put it back in the ferric. And it is quick. Hamons are quick. 10 seconds, maybe 15. I swish it around. Get another makeup pad. I fold it in half twice, dip it, and then on this one I'm actually rubbing like I'm trying to clean it. So I'm putting quite a bit of pressure, just running along that whole blade, giving a nice clean. And you can see it kind of brighten up. It's a little hard to see in this video, but you can see when you're doing it, when it's starting to get to the point you want. And just get all those surfaces nice and rubbed. I get another makeup pad for the other side. These makeup pads need to be clean. Do not drop it somewhere and pick it up, because who knows what that makeup pad will collect. It could get a piece of dirt and you'll end up scratching your surface. So make sure they're nice and clean, not been dropped or in a dirty area, because you will fight finding out why you have little scratches on your blade, and it's because you got grit in your makeup pads. I used to keep them in my shop, and that metal dust will even do that to your blade. So, all right, I think we're there. Give it a few touch-ups. That's it. Nothing too special, nothing too fancy. So this is the ammonia. It's in a Windex bottle, but it's actually ammonia, like you buy at the store. That neutralizes that ferric. And now I rinse it off. You can see the green going down in the sink. That's that neutralized ferric. And again, dish soap. This also helps neutralize it and clean it up. So ferric chloride, and then dish soap to clean it up. Ferric chloride, ammonia, and then dish soap. Nice and clean. Get it all rinsed off in hot water. I switch that around just to get all the ferric and ammonia down the drain. Got some thunder outside. Sounds like rain's coming. All right. I'm just hanging it there for a second while I get my gloves off. Another tip. If you've got your ferric like I do in this shop here, you will want to keep a lid on it, because the fumes from ferric will rust everything. So if you've got metal and stuff inside your shop and an open container of ferric chloride, you will find that your shop is getting rusty really quick. So even those little pieces of makeup pad that I throw in the garbage will cause some rust before they dry out. All right, so my battery dies here, so you'll see a break, but this is 1500 grit silica powder. You can buy it on eBay. I think that's where I've got it, and this bag has lasted me for years. It's just a gray powder silica. I've put 3-in-1 oil all over the whole blade pretty heavily, just to help stop some rust or anything. It also helps as an agent to polish with this silica powder. I am using the same pads that you buy at any hardware store that you put under your chair legs, that stiff pad with silica powder on it. And I'm just rubbing it fairly hard, and that silica powder's polished. So that's where the battery died. I'm kind of back where I ended up. A little more oil, my pad to polish it up, and you're just getting all of that cleaned off. Pay special attention to that hardened portion along the edge. That'll be the darkest that you're going to turn lighter, so it ends up etching darker, but as you polish, it becomes the lighter portion of your Hamon. I used to use flits, and 6 years ago maybe I did a how-to on blade forums, how to do my Hamons, and I think in that I still have that I use flits metal polish. I don't use that anymore. It actually removes quite a bit of the dirty Hamon. It gets rid of that dark line, which I like and has kind of become a signature of mine. I want to keep that dark oxide line that you can see. So I don't use flits anymore. This is all I do. If you guys end up doing this and follow my tutorial on how to do it, I would love to hear you give me a shout out and have a look at them. I always like to see, I can almost pick them out when I'm looking at pictures, who's used it and who hasn't. You know, the Hamons show up differently, so let me know. So we've got it polished up. Looks pretty good. There's still some dark out on that very tip that I'll end up polishing off. But you can see that's the dirty Hamon. That's just some oil spots up on the top part. So when you're getting pictures, another tip, after you've finished your knife and want to get some pictures and show that Hamon, get a little bit of oil on the blade. That oil makes that Hamon pop a little bit. And that's it. Appreciate it, guys. Next one is going to be handle construction. I'm going to do a basic handle on this one, so stay tuned. That'll be episode 7. Thanks, everyone.